looking back from your position of wisdom, what do you have to say to the American public about your cookie advocacy?
Well, I should have been advocating for, reduction in hamburger or steak prices. The funny undercurrent of that is that's kind of what started my political advocacy.
I know. It appeared to me that you were of that American evangelical stripe. When I met you, I thought, okay, so that's Charlie's cauldron, the matrix out of which he emerged. Maybe cauldron's not the right metaphor. But I'm curious, think that your political rebellion took a conservative form.
Yes, the non-political, non-historical literature that we were being assigned was what I call pre-woke, very much anti-colonial, the anti-Western, that we are the contaminants on the world, that we are polluting other tribes.
I've learned a lot of things in the last 10 years that have shocked me so bad I don't know how to recover exactly. And one of them was that I'm talking to Charlie Kirk, and Charlie came out of nowhere 10 years ago and built the world's most influential organization of young conservatives. And he did that from scratch. He did that by going to universities pretty much single-handedly, setting up card tables, offering to discuss and debate all the issues that weren't being discussed and debated in these places set up for exactly that reason. And iterating as he grew, establishing conservative clubs on campuses all across the United States, building a grassroots organization, learning how to debate, despite the fact that he hadn't gone to college, and actually playing the role on campus colleges that the professors in the classes were supposed to play. And so, why watch my discussion with Charlie? Well, to learn who he is, to listen to how he did this. He had a vision and a calling, and he found his way and made it spectacularly successful while he was still very young, and has ended up playing a very significant cultural role, a transformative role that is by no means over. And so I think the podcast is interesting in and of itself because the story is so compelling, but it also contains many lessons, you might say, for those who are searching for a productive, adventurous, romantic way forward. So join me in my discussion with Charlie Kirk, founder and leader of Turning Point USA, the world's largest conservative youth organization. So I've got a gotcha question for you. So now you're warned. Okay, so you know that Robert F. Kennedy and Mehmet Oz, and I suppose Jay Bhattacharya too, are all hands on deck to restore American health. And that likely the biggest problem that's confronting us is insulin resistance.
I agree with that.
Too much, way too much sugar and obesity and all that goes along with it. But insulin resistance it's just devastating. It makes you old, it makes you diabetic, it's terrible. It interferes with your cognition, it increases the probability that you'll get Alzheimer's. And that's all linked to carbohydrate excess intake, right? You agree with all that?
I agree with that.
Okay, and yet, when you were in high school, one of the first things you did to begin your political career was agitate for a reduction or stabilization of the price of cookies at the school?
We were against cookie inflation.
Yeah. So looking back from your position of wisdom 13, 14 years later, what do you have to say to the American public about your cookie advocacy?
What I should have been advocating for, reduction in the hamburger or steak prices. You see, that would have been a much better health approach. But all kidding aside, the funny undercurrent of that is that's kind of what started my political advocacy.
I know, and it is hilarious.
I kind of look back, even just 13 years ago when cookie prices were the number one concern. This was before DoorDash, this was before all that. And I look at these high school kids now, what they're able to order into high school. They have entire cubby rooms of like half of the high school class that is just getting takeout. So in our high school in the suburbs of Chicago, the biggest thing was these basically homemade cookies that nearly tripled in price over the course of a year. So we started Students Against Cookie Inflation, which was a rather righteous effort, I might say.
How old were you?
I was, at that time, 16, 17 years old.
16. And how much before that do you think your interest in the political developed?
Definitely had an interest. I'd say I was really fascinated by American history, why we were a great country. It was hard to not be politically oriented or opinionated based on the time that I grew up in. Understand the time and place. When I was in 8th grade, this guy named Barack Obama came onto the political scene from Chicago, and everybody had an opinion about him. In fact, he became...
Where were you at the time?
I was in the suburbs of Chicago, Wheeling, Arlington Heights area.
Yeah, okay.
And Obama was a homegrown, which he really wasn't, but he was, a senator from Illinois, a homegrown, almost quasi-messianic political figure. I mean, you remember how it captured the nation. Times 10 in the Chicagoland area. Remember, Obama did his victory speech in Grant Park in downtown Chicago. That's where he celebrated his victory in 2008. And so it was just an all-encompassing, almost, political moment where it was at very high social cost to be disagreeable with the rise of Obama in 2008. And mind you, I was a 7th or 8th grader at the time, and actually going into 9th grade. And so I decided at my very best to push back. Oh, really? Is he going to fulfill all these promises? Is he really going to be able to bring utopia? And admittedly, I was rather clumsy and shallow in my capacity to be able to articulate those beliefs. But I had something in me that wanted to push back against the orthodoxy of the time.
Okay, I met you. Do you remember when we first met? Was it 2016,
I think
2017?
it might have been 17, 18. I came to Toronto because and still to this day, this is correct, I was so moved by your lectures and your videos that they significantly changed my life. And I really wanted to meet you more than anything else. And
Well, I remember
you were kind enough to make time for that.
Yeah, well, I remember that meeting, and I remember trying to figure out who you were because of what you were doing and the fact that you had this remarkable organizational capacity. But what I'm interested in now, when you is what I'm very interested in trying to figure out what inclined you to take the path that you took. Now, you said, okay, so you said Obama, but you said something else at the same time. You said that you had been reading American history, okay, and that you were concerned with, interested in, and convinced by, I suppose, all of those, this issue of what made America great.
Correct.
Okay, so now, so this is interesting and worth taking apart because for decades, certainly since the 60s, the typical pathway for someone young who was assessing the history of his or her country would have been to read it through a highly critical lens. So, for example, I remember when I was 13 or 14, so that would have been mid-70s, I was reading Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas and some of the so-called new journalists. And they weren't of the left exactly the way you would conceptualize the left now. They were more like radical literary figures, I would say. But the mid-70s ethos certainly was to read history, sociology critically. And I don't mean you were being uncritical. I mean to take an anti-establishment stance.
Yes.
Like in the 60s, that was all, well, anti-establishment, free love, the sexual revolution is coming, everyone's going to be free. By the time the 70s came along, which was the milieu I was embedded in, all of the optimism of the 60s had pretty much vanished, but all of the cynicism 100% remained. Now you, though, interestingly enough, in Chicago, and this would be mid-2000s. So
Be
quite a bit
2008,
later.
2009.
Right, near the end of the first decade of the 2000s. You were reading American history, and as you said, in the height of the Obama
Craze.
fervor, sure. But your take was positive and patriotic.
Correct.
So why? Why do you think that was? Like, what do you think what made you different? Like, when I met you, you were very, I would say, relatively sheltered still, and very, very straight-laced. And from the Canadian perspective, you were of the, it appeared to me that you were of that American evangelical stripe, which we have some of in Alberta, not a lot. It's not really a Canadian thing. And so when I met you, I thought, okay, so that's Charlie's, that's the cauldron, the matrix out of which he emerged. Maybe cauldron's not the right metaphor. But I'm curious, like, why do you think that your political rebellion took a conservative form when that isn't, it's not common for young people, and it certainly wasn't the pattern of the time from, say, 1965 probably till about when you were adolescent.
So that's a phenomenal analysis and question. Let me just add to it. The literature, the non-political, non-historical literature that we were being assigned in 6th, 7th, 8th grade was what I call pre-woke. It was almost there. And so it was like books that come to mind is a book called like Things Fall Apart. I don't know if you're familiar with this book.
Chinua Achebe, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I think the main character was Okonkwo. I could be wrong. I'm just drawing from like 13, 14 years. Basically, the entire premise of the book, based on my memory, is that there are this wonderful tribe, and they all get along in Africa, and these evil colonialists come in, and things fall apart, and there's internal strife. And the end of the book is basically the summary of all of these relationships of these evil colonialists that say, and here's the history of just the sub-Saharan Africa, basically dismissing all of the complexities and the beauties of this specific
right. So it's kind of a testament to Rousseau, but it was written by an African, that book.
Correct. And again, I'm drawing from almost a decade-old memory, but I remember the discussions we'd have in class were very much anti-colonialist, anti-Western, that we are the contaminants on the world, that we are polluting other tribes. And again, mind you, that we're in 8th or 9th grade discussing this, so I don't know what post-structuralism is or postmodernism is, but it was pre-woke. We weren't quite there, though. And so from the historical standpoint, it was not 1619 Project, but it was, we're going to spend a whole month on slavery, and we're going to spend 3 days on the founding.
Right. And did you spend any of the time when you were studying slavery assessing the fact that the UK was the only country that's ever existed in the history of the world that spent about 2 centuries and a tremendous proportion of its treasury eradicating slavery around the world at the behest of Protestant Christians,
Correct.
because that's the story.
And I never remember knowing the name Wilberforce.
Wilberforce, yeah. See, this is a very interesting thing. You know, I actually didn't come across, this is so strange, but life is very strange. I didn't come across the name Wilberforce till I was probably in my 40s.
Isn't that amazing?
It's beyond comprehension.
I didn't get to know him until the last 5 years.
Last 5 years.
Yeah.
Is that right, eh? Is
Even
that right?
me, even
is that
in
right?
the political
even in that
world.
milieu.
I might have heard it, but not until someone looked at me seriously and said, you have to study this guy. This is a preacher. This is a man of faith that led to the abolition of slavery, probably in the entire...
Under impossible conditions.
Exactly.
Right? He devoted his whole life to it. And the link between that and the religious ideation is rock solid. It's
one-to-one.
It's one-to-one, absolutely. And it's also the case that his ideas wouldn't have fallen on fertile ground, because they did relatively. Like, when you can make a radical cultural shift in one lifetime, which is no time at all historically, you know that you're at the forefront of ideas whose time has come.
Yes.
And that was clearly the case for Wilberforce. And he certainly is one of those people who stood up against the greedy, self-centered, and malevolent ethos of his time. But the UK swung around behind him impossibly rapidly, and then with their full might. And you know, I've learned a lot of things in the last 10 years that have shocked me so bad I don't know how to recover exactly. And one of them was that the public school system was set up by fascists on the Prussian military model. I've never been able to figure out exactly what to do with that. They were literally trying to make thoughtless worker drones.
Desk workers. That's what bureaucrat means.
Yeah, well, or factory workers.
Correct, that's right.
And what that in itself wasn't so bad, because the country was industrializing. But right underneath that was the idea that while you were doing that, it was necessary to pretty much stamp out or fail to develop anything that would produce any kind of creative entrepreneurship. It's like, okay, that's hard to swallow. And then when I read about how the food pyramid was developed, that's just beyond comprehension. I don't know if that's the worst crime ever committed in the United States, but it's up there. And then the next mystery is Wilberforce is another mystery of that magnitude. And even you might say, particularly on the left.
Correct.
It's like, okay, you guys, you're for the oppressed, which I don't buy for a second, but especially because I've watched in the last 10 years the lefties sell out the poor worldwide to the climate apocalypse mongers. And that's just been a catastrophe for places like Africa, like Bagat Wade has been so forthright in observing. But the fact that slavery and reparations, all of that, the unfair founding of the United States has been a central dogma of the radical leftists. They blame slavery on the West, and the fact that the radical types have control over the education system means that no one, even educated in a conservative milieu, knows who the hell Wilberforce was. And I just don't know what to do.
Or Thaddeus Stevens, or the heroism of John Quincy Adams. Those would be, some main protagonist characters for the abolition of slavery here in America. And so when I was in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, something in me, and I don't quite know, my parents very patriotic, but not political. Patriotic, but not political. They're conservative, but we were not a political family. But very patriotic. Something in me desired to try to find the other side of the story, to try to push back a little bit from the incessant narrative that was being built. And I do want to make sure this is clear. We were not yet at the place where the teachers were saying America was racist. In fact, it was actually much more insidious than that.
And so that even in 2008, that still wasn't occurring.
I could make, at least in my environment, I could make an argument, though, that what they were doing when I was in high school is actually long-term much more effective to create revolutionaries for the left than what they're doing now, because it really didn't warrant that much of a backlash. It wasn't overly provocative. They weren't saying to the white kids in class, hey, go sit on this side of the class, and black kids on this side of the class.
Yeah, well, those things always happen one tiny step at a time.
Of course, but when I was being schooled, there was no parents showing up at school board meetings about critical race theory. Now, these elements were laced throughout all of the curriculum.
Right.
And it took a very discerning eye. And for whatever reason, how I was raised or just something in me, around 10th or 11th grade, I asked the question. I said, look, we have spent an entire month on slavery. Totally get it. Terrible thing. But we spent so little time on the brilliance of the founders and what they've created, and the greatest political document in human history and what went into that. And it was an underemphasis on the heroism and the courage and the brilliance, and an overemphasis on the evil and the tragedy and the horror without even the redemption arc behind it.
Shopify powers millions of businesses worldwide, supporting everyone from established brands to entrepreneurs just starting their journey. You can create your professional storefront effortlessly with Shopify's extensive library of customizable templates designed to reflect your brand's unique identity. Boost your productivity with Shopify's AI-powered tools to craft compelling products, descriptions, engaging headlines, and even enhance your product's photography, all with just a few clicks. Plus, you can market your business like a pro without hiring a team. Easily develop and launch targeted email campaigns and social media content that reaches customers wherever they spend their time, online or offline. If that's not enough, Shopify offers expert guidance on every aspect of commerce, from inventory management to international shipping logistics to seamless return processing. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period and start selling today at shopify.com/JBP. Go to shopify.com/JBP. Again, that's shopify.com/JBP.
Yeah, well, the thing that's so awful about that, as far as I'm concerned, from the leftist perspective, let's say, is if you are concerned with the poor and the oppressed, and then you have to be discerning there, because there are people who are poor and oppressed as a consequence of their own idiocy. And that's not so uncommon, as you know in your own life by watching your pathway to failure. So, but given that there are people who are unfortunate, you'd think that the appropriate tack would be to determine who in history served them most effectively. And I just can't see anyone you could possibly point to who did that more effectively than Wilberforce, ever. And so you would think that instead of erecting monuments to Lenin, the leftists would erect monuments to Wilberforce. But not only do they not do that, no one knows who the hell he was.
It is one of the greatest memory holding of a hero in Western history.
Yeah.
I completely agree. Why is it? My hypothesis is he's Christian. Is that you cannot highlight a man of faith who did something with such valor and such significance. Yeah. It is at odds with almost every other fundamental narrative that they must try to present.
Yeah, that's right. I think that's right, that it is fundamentally, but that begs another question. And that would be why, given that Wilberforce was clearly a force for the good that Obama, for example, would have been pushing, right? By which I mean movement towards a polity where there were no racial or ethnic prejudice. If Wilberforce is the poster boy for that sort of effort, which if you understand his life and you read about it, I can't see how you can conclude that, then why would the lefties forego that merely to oppose the fact that his motivation was fundamentally Christian? Because that points to something deeper, right? It points to the fact that the true war, so to speak, isn't political. It's not left versus right. It's something deeper. And then if it is anti-Christian, then why? Like, what does that mean? Like, there's an Enlightenment element there, right? The Enlightenment types, especially after the French Revolution, generated this narrative that science and religion were radically opposed, and that if you were on the side of religion, you were against clear, rational, logical thinking. And so you could imagine a stream of anti-Christian sentiment emerging on the rationalist side, right? But it isn't obvious to me at all that the leftist types who don't talk about Wilberforce are anti-Christian because they're scientific rationalists. No way. All you have to do is talk to them for like 15 seconds and you find out that that's not the case. They might use those arguments from time to time, but they certainly don't apply the rigors of scientific thinking to their own radical hypotheses. So it's deeper than that. And so what is it exactly that they're objecting to? Is it the fact that the more radical leftist story, Marxist, let's say, is in its essence anti-Christian, which I think is a fair statement, and that why would that be more important? This is the strange thing. Why would that be more important than serving the poor and fighting for the abolition of slavery and all of its associated prejudices? Because it still doesn't get you out of the conundrum, which is why not Wilberforce? Instead of tearing down statues, why not erect statues to him? Yeah, so, well, I know that's a hard thing to sort out, but you got any? Yeah, obviously you were feeling something like this in high school,
that's
right?
Correct.
You guys are throwing out the baby with the bathwater here.
Correct.
Yeah, which baby exactly?
So my initial thought is that the leftist types, the ones that really understand it, they do not seek to achieve what a Wilberforce type figure would want, which is actual liberation and actual eradication of evil.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, I think they just want to be in charge.
Yeah, no, I think. Okay, so let's pivot on that for a minute. Okay, so because this is a problem that's going to face the right, and is already, and we can talk about that. So there are a group of people, 4% of the population, and then there's still a fringe around that would maybe be another 5% where you'd have to take it seriously. And so they're in the psychiatric diagnostic literature, they fall under the cluster B heading. Okay, they're histrionic, which means they're dramatic, and And I suppose if they're healthy and histrionic, then they become actors, right? And entertainers. So there's a positive spin on that. But if they're negative histrionic, they dramatize their pathology and use it as a weapon, okay? They're narcissistic, which means they want unearned social status. They're psychopathic, which means they're predatory parasites. And they're antisocial, and that's just your standard criminal types. So that all fits in cluster B. Then there's personality traits that go along with that. Machiavellian, they use language not to convey information, but to manipulate, and to manipulate instrumentally for their own purposes. So if I'm speaking with you in a Machiavellian manner, I have a goal in mind that has nothing to do with the words that I'm using. You may have talked to journalists like that many times.
Many times.
Yes, many times.
So
okay. So they're Machiavellian.
That's so well said.
They're narcissistic. Again, that's an overlap. They're psychopathic. Oh, yes. And on the personality side, that associates with sadism. And so all of that culminates in a personality style that has the proclivity to take positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others. Okay, so now those people, let's say they're 4% of the population. Okay, so this is what they do, is they look for a story that's working. Could be Christianity, Judaism, Marxism, could be conservatism, doesn't matter what the story is. They look to see where it has purchase. So where the people who play that game have power. They infiltrate that, they advertise themselves as the vanguard of that movement, and they do that for no other reason than to gain power. Right, and so this is politically agnostic. Now they'll guise themselves in political cloaks, and they'll learn all the tropes. I mean, this sort of thing, you can see this sort of thing emerging like mad on the right, on Twitter, for example. But it's been characteristic of the left for a long time, insofar as the left has power.
Shit.
But you are the one who just said, I think they want power.
Yes.
That's part of that. In the biblical tradition, there's a battle always between the ethos that brings abundance. So that would be the miraculous provision of fish and bread and water that never exhausts itself. That's all consequence of a particular kind of ethos, the one that Wilberforce embedded. That's juxtaposed against usurpation, Luciferian usurpation of power. Right, that's the temptation that Christ is offered in the desert, right? The third temptation is the temptation of power.
The whole world.
Yeah, that's right. And one of the things Moses is punished brutally by God for using power near the end of his...
And for thinking he has the power to actually make water come out of the rock.
Well,
not
yeah, that it's dependent on him.
And on him, not God.
Yeah. Well, and worse than that, not only on him, but on it, God tells him to invite with his words, and he uses force and authority, right? So he doesn't enter the promised land. So that's a good indication of the danger of power, even when wielded by someone who is estimable, right? Because you have to give Moses his
a lot of credit.
Right, well, exactly.
For dealing with that group.
Yeah, and then, of course, that's the temptation that's offered Christ. So I do think it's a power game.
Yes.
And then there's a commandment not to use God's name in vain. And then there's the comments in the Gospels about the Pharisees, right? The Pharisees are exactly the people who use religious terminology, so moral terminology, to cloak their power-seeking machinations, right? And Christ goes after them. I think the best account of that is in Matthew, where he tells them that they're like, it's pretty brutal, that they're like...
Broods of vipers, yeah.
Worse, they're like graves full of rotting bodies that someone whitewashed, right? And he says that they're the people, had they been alive in the time of the prophets they purport to follow, they would have been part of the mob that would have killed them. Right, that's actually part of, you may know this, but that's part of what sets them up for the crucifixion, right? Because they're not very happy with those insults publicly delivered. But that shows you also how old the problem is. So you can imagine one of the worst possible sins is to take the highest possible virtue. So that would be, well, we stand for the oppressed, we stand for the poor, and then to gerrymander that so that your standing for that only pushes you towards power.
That's right.
Right, and then it also, there's a clue in the Gospels, I think it's in the Gospels as well, about how you figure that out. And the answer is, by their fruits you will know them, right? So you look at, well, what I've done is I looked at the consequences, for example, of the green energy programs in Germany and the UK. Well, what's the consequence? Let's take Germany. Germany pollutes far more per unit of energy than they did 10 years ago, and their energy prices are 5 times as high. They're completely dependent on dictators of the worst sort.
Yes.
They continue to make the same mistakes. They're deindustrializing very, very cataclysmically. It's destabilizing their political environment, and that falls disproportionately on the poor. I don't see a way around that analysis.
And nature worshiping is not anything new. All throughout the scriptures.
No, that's right.
Elijah, is that whole story is a manifestation of the nature worshipers versus the belief in God. But back to just to reiterate a very profound point you made. In evangelical circles, we get wrong, which is people think do not take the Lord's name in vain, just to say do not say God in an expletive way. It actually, the word is don't carry the name's Lord, the name of the Lord in vain. Meaning don't do actions in the name of God. So you're exactly right. And so people wear the costume of the holy, or they appropriate.
Well, that's exactly what Christ tells the Pharisees. Literally, he says they wear the garbs of the priestly
and we are,
to elevate their moral status.
And this is what we believe is partially blaspheming the Holy Spirit, which is to take all of the trappings of religion.
Oh, that's interesting.
And to do evil in that name. We believe that is one of the, if not the most evil.
So that you think that's the transgression against, okay, so that's interesting because, so my psychological understanding of the idea of the Holy Spirit is that the Holy Spirit is what possesses your words when you truly aim up. And this makes sense to me psychologically because the thoughts that make themselves manifest to you spontaneously are directly related to the intent of your aim. That's how literally how your verbal mind works, your imagination as well. You know, if you go on a date and you aim at sexual contact on the first date, the fantasies that come along with that aim will be of that nature, obviously. And if you are on the hunt, so to speak, for a marital partner, the fantasies that accompany that will be quite different. So this is literally how your imagination. It's also the case that, you know, it's the same idea with the date. If it's short-term mating is your goal, which by the way is the goal of the dark tetrad types differentially. So what that means is that the sexual revolution handed women over to the worst men.
That's right.
So that's fun to know. But it's definitely the case that your aim determines what comes to mind. Now you said that that sin against the Holy Ghost, which is the unforgivable sin, is the sin that occurs when you use the Lord's name in vain. So when you claim to be motivated by what's divine, but are actually serving the Luciferian spirit of usurpation and power.
Right. It can be. I mean, it's an open theological discussion.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
But I take Dennis Prager's view of an Old Testament on this view, which is, think about how much, this is a great example. Think about how much damage those evil priests did.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great example.
Look, most of the people that I've spoken with who proclaim themselves to be atheists are atheists for two reasons. And I mean the good faith atheists, let's say. First of all, they tend to be tilted in the engineering cognition direction, so they're much more oriented towards things than people, and that's a stable temperamental trait. But they've almost all also invariably been hurt by someone or some institution that's claimed to be religious. And then you could also see that obviously betraying someone in Dante's account of the Inferno, when he goes down to the bottom of hell, he finds the betrayers right next to Satan,
yes,
right?
So Judas, Crassus, and Brutus.
Right.
So,
okay, so the
and
idea
then the lake of ice, which is...
Right, that's where Satan is encased, right? Because he's too brittle to move.
Yeah. What if I told you there's a tiny nutrient missing from your body that could potentially change everything about how you feel? Well, if you've ever wondered why you're feeling sluggish, sleeping poorly, or aging faster than you'd like, the answer might be simpler than you think. That's where Fatty 15 comes in. Our cells need essential nutrients to stay healthy, and most of us are deficient in one critical one, C15. Fatty 15 is a science-backed, award-winning, pure, vegan-friendly C15 supplement with just one ingredient, and it has 3 times more cellular benefits than omega-3 or fish oil. Plus, it's free from flavors, allergens, and preservatives. C15 is the only ingredient in Fatty 15, 100% pure. And unlike fish oil supplements that oxidize quickly, Fatty 15 naturally resists breakdowns both in bottle and in your body. Fatty 15 works by replenishing your cells with C15, which repairs cellular damage, boosts energy production, and activates your body's natural repair mechanism for better sleep, mood, metabolism, and heart health. Plus, it comes in a beautiful, reusable glass and bamboo jar with eco-friendly refills delivered quarterly. Fatty 15 is on a mission to replenish the C15 levels in your body and restore your long-term health. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/Peterson. Fatty 15, essential nutrition for healthier cells and a healthier you.
So the reason for that, I think, is that there isn't a more upsetting psychological phenomenon than being betrayed. You stake yourself on someone, you trust them, they're now a foundation, they're part of the foundation of your life.
Completely.
Oh, so, and there's no worse form of betrayal than betrayal that's done in the name of the highest good, right? I mean, there can't be, obviously.
Yes.
Okay, so, all right, so I thought that sin against the Holy Ghost was something like rejection of the Abrahamic call. You know, God comes to Abraham as the spirit of adventure. He says, go out into the world, leave your zone of comfort, move away from your people, and have the terrible adventure of your life. Well, if you reject that, you can't develop.
Yes.
Right? Because you're rejecting the spirit of
and
learning
think of how many
yourself.
young men are rejecting it every day.
Well, what's terrible about that, this is something we could talk about too. I'm curious about your experience. It's been my experience that it doesn't take that much encouragement for the people you're describing to be inspired to try. Now, I've talked to thousands of young men now who've had that experience. You know, like I see a lot of them at my lectures. They come to the meet and greets, for example, and they tell me, it's great. It's really great. they tell me that, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, because it's starting to be a long time now, 8 years ago even, they were not in good shape. And they came across my lectures or books and decided that there was something worth aiming for, and then decided to try. So to tell the truth, that's a very common
What the hell?
vow, let's say, to take on more responsibility. And they usually laugh about starting to make their bed or something like that, which is a lot less trivial than people think. And then it's straighten them out. The terrible thing is how little encouragement that actually took. And so why are people coming out to see you on campuses, and what kind of response do you get from the people that you talk to?
The responses have been incredible. First, the crowds alone, we're drawing crowds of 3, 4, 5,000 people in the middle of the day just for me to debate a random college kid or a college professor. It's remarkable.
So walk me through one of those events, Charlie.
And so I've been doing that for a decade. So I started, as we know, we started Turning Point USA. One of the things I really wanted to make sure is that I was in touch with the target audience that I was trying to convince and trying to persuade. No better way to do that than just go to the college campus itself, set up a card table with, maybe a poster that says something like, I think government should be smaller, something like that, and start a discussion. I would do this at University of Wisconsin-Madison. I would do this at University of Illinois when we had almost no funding, no connections, no idea what I was doing. I've always believed in the grassroots interaction. Similar to your meet and greets. No data, no chart, no abstraction can get to that personal human-to-human contact. So I've been doing that for many years. And then Steven Crowder, to his credit, kind of popularized this idea of debating and putting it on. I said, why don't I also film these interactions? And so I started to do that around 2018. So it's been about 7 or 8 years now. And, then 10 kids would show up and then 20 kids. And we started to put these on the internet, and kind of concurrent and simultaneous to your rise, where you diagnosed what was going on in the West quicker and more accurately than anybody else, especially with young men. We started to see our popularity increase as we started to address some of the underlying problems that young people were facing, but in particular, young men were facing. And then COVID happened. We were basically out of business for, a year, in a sense where we weren't able to do campus activities. Donald Trump was no longer in office, and we had to really kind of rebuild on campus basically about 2 years ago. So let's just say the spring of 2023, things really started to change, where we would do these campus events prior, and we would bring in your traditional conservatives, 300 to 400 people, maybe a couple 100 interested types, maybe 50 liberals, 500 students, call it a day. That's a success. All of a sudden in 2023, we were drawing a different type of person and student. First of all, we were drawing people outside of the campuses that were welders, electricians, and plumbers, and the working men that heard that we were in town, and they just
How'd they hear?
Social media.
Okay.
And so decentralized promotion. And so they would show up. And I saw that. I mean, these were guys that would go up to the question line, and they were not asking about Rousseau, or they were not asking about Jacques Derrida.
Yeah.
They were saying, how do I be a better person? Because I'm expecting a daughter in 6 months.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And all of a sudden, here I am, not in the position where you are, nearly as seasoned to give advice to that young man, but he's searching, and he's looking for anyone that seems to have an idea of how the world is supposed to work, that is professing a worldview of order and structure and discipline.
Something that he could do.
Yes. And then he was looking to me for advice. And that was a different dynamic. Whereas prior, all the questions the last 8 years before that were, hey, Charlie, what do you think about the tax rate? What do you think about abortion?
Right.
And I still get a lot of that, but it was something different. It was young men especially that were seeking purpose and seeking a destination.
So this is crucially important, this transformation, because one of the things that, so let's go back to that 60s dynamic, that anti-authoritarian 60s dynamic. The role of the left in the 60s was like an entrepreneurial progressive radicalism, let's say, and the stance of the conservative was, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, guys. And that's a pretty good dynamic, because you need a force for change, and you need a force that resists that. But I think what the conservatives did wrong, like profoundly wrong, was that their brakes, this is why they're always dismissed as reactionary, their brakes, B-R-A-K-E-S, their brakes were fundamentally, they're also moralistic. It was finger wagging. And this is something that was distasteful, let's say, especially about the hypocritical evangelical conservative types.
I agree with that.
Okay, but it was also strategically inappropriate, because it's very hard to say to young people who might tilt in the progressive direction, because they're a little more revolutionary in spirit, let's say, or also a little more immature, that the reason that to abstain sexually, for example, is because you shouldn't do it. Now, that's true, but it's a weak argument. I was talking to my wife this morning about this. We'd been apart for a few days, and I saw her again yesterday, and I was very happy about that. And she has a podcast. She's trying to reach out to young women, because they're just as or more trouble.
They're in more trouble.
They're just harder to talk to by a lot. Our discussion centered around the fact that it isn't that you should get married, although you should. It's that there is no alternative that's anywhere near as good by any standard whatsoever, regardless of position of analysis or time length. Anything you do other than that, even though marriage is very difficult, and
the consequence.
every other alternative is far, far worse. And so if you want a pathway forward to what the Conservatives support, the Conservatives should be offering an invitation. They shouldn't be moralizing. And so you're saying that they shouldn't even be political at the moment. And I know you're a figure whose political activity is grounded in a religious substrate.
Correct.
Like
That's right.
Shapiro's, of course, like that too, and Dennis Prager.
Christianity is my foundation.
Right. And so now you're seeing that these young men who are coming, especially the working class types, they're not so interested in the political. They're probably not even interested in the arguments exactly. They're looking for something else.
That's right. They're looking for direction. They're looking for connection. They're also looking for validation that the way they're thinking and the way they're feeling is directionally correct. That it's so that having a direction is correct. Yeah, exactly.
For example.
That not meandering through life.
Yeah.
Not having the aimless despair of walking in circles.
Yeah, not castrating yourself so your toxic masculinity vanishes.
Bingo.
And sometimes literally, far too often now, literally.
Right. They're chopping off.
Yeah,
parts.
exactly.
And so what we saw in 2023, and again, so I have to wear multiple hats. Part of my hat is a political strategist. Part of my hat is just trying to be a role model for young people. Part of my hat is explaining these ideas to young people. I kind of connected all the dots. I said, 2024 is going to be a rebellion of the men of the West, unlike any that we've ever seen. And I would say this to the experts, and they would dismiss it. They said, no. Because Roe versus Wade got repealed, remember, either that summer or summer 2022. I can't remember. It might have been, irrelevant. The point being is that Roe versus Wade was supposed to be the most important political issue of 2024, and that women were going to rise up in major numbers. I said, first of all, that might be true on one side of the sex spectrum. On the other side, or binary, the other side, there is something happening with men that no one is talking about, no one wants to acknowledge, no one wants to admit. And so separately, the Trump team, to their credit, believed in it and actually ran an explicitly masculine campaign going on podcasts like Joe Rogan and Theo Von. And so they were very much embracing of this, to their credit. But separately, we must diagnose, why is this happening? And the education system, as you've astutely pointed out many times, is hyper feminine. There's no place for young men, especially young white men of a Christian
I think it's
persuasion.
1 in 4 boys is now given an ADHD diagnosis.
Right.
It's something
and even
like
the New
that.
York Times has said this is for parents, not for kids.
Yeah.
Meaning there's no medicinal reason for this to happen, according to the New York Times.
Yeah, right. So things have gone particularly sideways when the New York Times.
I encourage people to read this cover story. It was unbelievable, where they were basically saying, after this major study, that like 1% of the kids actually do need ADHD medication that are completely out of control. But almost like 90 to 95% are just because the parents don't want to have an unruly kid around.
Yeah, and if that's the New York Times diagnosis, then you can also be absolutely 100% certain that they underplay the role of the educational establishment in setting up the circumstances so that parents are likely to draw that conclusion. I mean, with all this trans butchery nightmare, my profession, particularly the social work end of it, but my real psychologists, let's say, were also stunningly craven in their unwillingness to resist this. The mantra was to parents, well, would you rather have a live trans child or a dead child? Which there was never, Charlie, a shred of evidence for that.
It's one of the most evil things that has happened.
It is unbelievable. The people who promoted that should be imprisoned.
I agree.
It's absolutely
and it's
brutal.
widespread, and it's still in the fibers of the pediatric community.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It really
is. For sure. Well, the Supreme Court of the UK may have broken the back of that movement a week ago.
Remarkably.
That was unbelievable. That was one of the most... Now and then the Brits, God love them, do something quite radical in the right direction.
Right?
Brexit was a good example of that.
Oh, that's interesting.
They put through that free speech legislation that the Labour Party tried to rescind that has actually reshaped the universities to some substantial degree. That was in part a consequence of me being disinvited from Cambridge, which had a long-term consequence that the disinviters hadn't really reckoned on, because a whole group of professors at Cambridge got together and decided that they were going to change the policies at Cambridge, which they did in a historic vote, and then they changed the policies at the national level. And the repercussions of that haven't stopped yet. But so this terrible demoralization, right? So, all right, now you're advertising on social media. Let's go back and tell this whole story. So, because I'm very curious about it. So you had an intuition that you could go to campuses. Okay, so tell me where'd that idea come from, do you think?
Well, I never went to college, first of all, which is...
Right, you've been to many colleges.
I've been to more colleges than most people. You might have me beat, but I've been to well over 200 campuses across this country.
No, you've got me beat.
Yeah, I mean, almost every college. You can imagine. I've either given a lecture, a speech, or started a chapter there.
Yeah. So my daughter doesn't have a university degree, so she started a university. So that's very comical.
Exactly.
But this is good. Okay, so that means you do have a university education. You just got it a very different way.
That's right.
Okay, so you decided. That's interesting too, because it's like I asked you what your motivation for doing this was, and the first thing you said was that you didn't have a degree. So that's very interesting. So what, were you also curious about going to campuses? Like,
yes, and that's really a great point. So just as a little background, I wanted to go to West Point. I didn't get in. I told my parents I would take a gap year to kind of figure this out because I saw some momentum of a local political group that was out of the cookie group, by the way.
Okay.
That kind of kept growing. I said, I want to keep this going and play this out, see where this can be.
this was after high school, after high school.
Yeah, that's correct. That was the summer I graduated high school.
Okay.
A really amazing mentor by the name of Bill Montgomery, may he rest in peace, was the only guy ever. He said, Charlie, you shouldn't go to college. I was like, that's the most radical thing someone could say. So that idea was planted in my head. And I said, okay, I'll just take a gap year. I'll kind of figure things out.
Why did he tell you that?
He thought, in his own words, he sensed an entrepreneurial gift and skill that I had.
Right.
And a drive. He was a kind of an entrepreneur himself.
Okay, so he could see the entrepreneurial part of you, and he didn't think that would work well in college.
Yeah, and he said, you have to go create. Not just go,
oh, good. Oh, that was
what
good.
he said.
I see. Okay.
You have to go build. He said, you have something in you. You have a drive. You have a passion. You have a relentless kind of spirit. And he says, you shouldn't go to college. And that was the most radical thing that a suburban kid in Chicago could hear, because everyone would go to college.
Of course.
It's a mark of failure not to go to college.
Yeah,
And so not getting into West Point was very demoralizing. However, it was the greatest gift ever from the Lord, because I took the gap year, and to your credit, which is no one's ever put this together, all my friends were in college. So I would start visiting my friends in colleges. So you think about it, because I would go to high school, I would graduate high school, I still am friends with all my high school friends. So I'd go to University of Iowa, University of Illinois to go visit them, Northwestern. And I realized as I was trying to get this political thing off the ground, this is where it all stemmed from. And I was trying to put pieces together that the academy was where the fight needed
definitely.
to go towards.
Yeah.
And simultaneously, as I was trying to find funding and trying to get donors behind our effort, something that almost every wealthy person that I would encounter is they had a soft spot and a interest in trying to invest in college campuses, especially conservative-leaning philanthropists and business types in America. Think about 2012.
That's turned around to bite them pretty damn hard.
Oh, yeah, but it would get their attention, right? So here I would be at a cocktail party, and I'd be 18, 19 years old trying to get funding, trying to get someone's attention. They say, okay, what do you do? I said, well, I'm trying to bring conservatism to college campuses. Oh, really? And they would be sincere. They would lean in.
Right.
They'd say, well, what about my alma mater? Have you spoke there? And so I'd have a little connection. I'd say, well, maybe I could visit there if we have a little bit of money. And so it helped. So I had interest from the donor community.
Right. So you could see that there was an opening there, a door that was open.
And I had no idea how big that opening was. And the more that I learned, some of these donors, as you would say, they'd give hundreds of millions of dollars to these schools.
Yeah, right.
And so they had a lot of vested interest. They were very curious about a young guy that wants to go shake up these campuses. Because remember, that's when woke was really starting to come up.
Yeah.
13, 14, 15, we saw it bubble up.
For sure.
15 was, I think, the Pearl Harbor moment. It was Michael Brown, Ferguson, Missouri, hands up, don't shoot. That's where woke started to present itself in.
Oh, you'll have to tell me why you think that event was.
At least from because I think at the top of all woke elements, race was the primary, let's just say the primary fencing.
Yeah, it's the division point.
Correct. And so in 2015, when Ferguson, Missouri, the lie, the scam of hands up, don't shoot with Michael Brown, Black Lives Matter was born out of Ferguson, Missouri, actually on a college campus at University of Missouri in Columbia, Missouri. And that spread like wildfire through, of course, a lot of Democrat operatives and money being spent. Remember how long we spent on that news cycle of America's racist because of Michael Brown, and all the CNN commentators famously said, hands up and don't shoot. And we spent more time on race obsession in the last 2 years of Obama's presidency than the last 4 or 5 years prior. And that's because—
Well, that's a hallmark of the danger of allowing race to be an issue in the presidency to begin with.
Exactly. But an underappreciated element here is Eric Holder was setting the table for that with very loyal people in the Department of Justice that believed that police were inherently racist.
Right.
They were launching investigations into very successful police departments trying to find police brutality and racial bias. And so the table was set, and that was the mini George Floyd moment of the beginning of woke.
Well, and you know, psychologists played a role in that in a major way too, because you had Banaji and her crowd with the, what do they call that? The implicit association test, forcing the idea of implicit bias, you know, and social psychology is a very corrupt discipline, and it has been maybe from its onset. And it's stacked from top to bottom with careerists. And it was social psychologists, for example, who denied that there was any such thing as left-wing authoritarianism until 2017. Right. That was something you didn't get to think if you were a social psychologist or even investigate. We cracked that. There was a couple of people working on it around 2016. The last bit of research I did was on left-wing authoritarianism, and then my lab blew up. You know, it just became impossible for me to continue. But so that dovetailed with this insistence that people were looking at the world through a lens that was irremediably biased in terms of their privilege and their racial and ethnic
Precisely.
identity. And, and it's tricky because people do have a tilt in the ethnocentric direction, right? Because, well, how about because you favor your family, right? You tend to favor the local. You also tend to favor the non-novel.
And the familiar.
Well, exactly. And now there are exceptions to that. Well, you see this in the Old Testament accounts because sometimes the foreigner is the best thing that ever happened. So that would be like Jethro in the story of Moses' father-in-law.
Of course, and Midian.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the alternative that would be like Jezebel, who's the foreign devil, so to speak.
course.
And so, that's a paradox that's very difficult to properly navigate. Okay, so yeah, it's 2015, 2016, things went like seriously sideways. Okay,
And
so
that's
now,
where, just to complete the point, my job on campuses became far more interesting because our organization shifted from primarily, economic discussions of Marxism and capitalism to core cultural hotbed topics in 15, 16, 17, race. And then, of course, the next layer, gender, transgenderism. So the beast that Betty Friedan and Judith Butler raised, that monster, reared its head with incredible ferocity in 16 and 17 in the academy. And people don't believe me when I say this. I saw this happen. No, it's okay, just really quick. In 2012, 2013, there was almost no transgender anything on these campuses. It didn't exist. I could tell you, I went to these campuses. I talked to these students. You might have an effeminate looking guy maybe wearing a dress as a joke. It was not anywhere. The social contagion within 5 years was dramatic. It was a different place. You went from just, okay, you are who you are to, you're not going to use my pronouns, hyper tyrannical, hyper authoritarian. So then here we are, a 5-year-old organization with a growing infrastructure and a growing presence and a growing staffing, organization. And we multiplied significantly because then the donor types, hold on, what happened to my alma mater? Why is it that they're burning down UC Berkeley? Remember, Milo Yiannopoulos went to University of California, Berkeley in the spring of 17, and they burnt the whole place down. Ben Shapiro very similarly. And so we then found ourselves accidentally or through serendipity on the front lines of the American culture war.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that that's not accidental. You think about the way that you told your story. I mean, it's improbable, but you were of the temperamental type. That's that strange blend of entrepreneurial temperament and conservative temperament. Those things don't generally go together, right? The conservative temperament, you could accept the libertarians because they're probably the entrepreneurial conservatives.
And growing up, I actually was more libertarian. It's very interesting to say that.
Okay. Because that's where the entrepreneurial conservatives hang out, is with the libertarians.
That's right.
Right, and they have an uneasy alliance with
Great point.
Okay,
It really
okay.
is.
And so that temperamental factor was already operating at you in high school. And then you didn't get into West Point, you said, but you were interested in universities and you obviously had the intelligence to manage them. And so, it's very useful to develop an idiosyncratic pathway forward if you have the IQ horsepower to manage it, because it makes you unique if you could do that. So, okay, and so you had a mentor who told you that it's probably best for you not to go to college because you have an entrepreneurial bent. Now you're trying to build a political organization, but you're not exactly sure how. You're visiting the campuses and you have friends there, and you see that there's an opportunity to talk on campuses where you can also get an education in doing that, but also that there's donor interest. And that's very interesting too, because if you're a good entrepreneur, one of the things you do is you go talk to your marketplace always. That's the grassroots things, but also with regards to fundraisers. And you offer like 10 ideas, all of which you're interested in, and you see where the door opens. That's knocking.
Exactly right.
So you saw that there were these people who wanted to support the education of young people, but who could see that their money was being counterproductively spent.
To say the least.
Yeah. Well, leave large piles of money laying around unguarded and see who comes in first to take it. Right. That's that parasitical type.
That's right.
They'll swarm in there like mad. That's happened in all the
And they gravitate to
foundations.
the universities.
Yeah, well, it's the same phenomenon that we talked about earlier, that cluster B, narcissistic, dark tetrad, 4% of the population. They're looking around to see where, what would you say, inhabitable carcasses are lying around unintended.
And they're disproportionately represented at the academy.
Yeah.
That 4%
Yes.
might be 40% of the administrators or the professor types. Because think about it.
Increasingly that became the case.
Because they might be saying something to that target audience, the student, but they actually want to see that student become a leftist. There's a lot of Machiavellian influences in how these professors present their ideas.
Yeah, well, it's also the case that it was the Machiavellian administration. So what happened at the university, I watched this, is that
you lived it.
The administration encroached. And that's not surprising because there was money at afoot. So why wouldn't there be competition for the funding? So the administrators, who are generally failed faculty, by the way, failed and embittered faculty. So the faculty are already embittered because they're not rich like investment bankers. And then you take embittered faculty members who couldn't make it as faculty.
Perfectly said.
So now they encroach on the faculty who are too busy doing their job and too apolitical and also too willfully blind to notice the administration encroaches decision by decision until they radically outnumber the professors. And that's pretty much fait accompli by 2005, I would say. And then the woke mob took over the administration, and that took no time at all. Right. And so now that's where we're at in the universities, and I can't see how that would be reversed.
It cannot
okay,
be.
so now you tell me how you started going to campuses and what you did to begin with and how you got away with it.
So the first person who wrote us a check was a guy by the name of Foster Fries. May he also rest in peace. Amazing philanthropist. I met him very early on. I decided to go to the Republican National Convention in 2012 in pursuit of finding donors. This was August after I graduated high school. And I just had this idea to try to bring the conservative agenda to young people, to the next generation. I met him in a stairwell at the Republican National Convention. I gave him a stairwell pitch. And to your point, which is exactly right, I kind of presented 4 or 5 things really quickly.
Yeah.
No one trained it. I just kind of instinctively, I said, well, here's 5 ideas that I have. He laughed, he chuckled, gave me his business card. He said, be in touch. Sent me $10,000 the next week. That was like
How did you
$10
know that
million.
there was such a thing as finding donors? And what do you think it was that set you up to have the gall to assume you could do, first of all, to know that that was a thing, and then to have the gall to pursue it?
The second one, I don't know. I don't know where I got the gall to pursue it. I will say Bill Montgomery, being a mentor of mine, was very encouraging.
Okay. So you had someone encouraging you.
Yes. But
and you said he saw something in you.
yes, and he was
and he was an entrepreneur.
Yes, and he never asked for anything from me, which was very unique. It wasn't like he was trying to have some agenda. He was 72
So
years
you
old.
had a mentor,
Yes.
which you desperately need as a young person, definitely, and someone who believes that you can do it.
And you think about it, you're 18 years old. You don't know how to cash checks. You don't know.
Yeah.
You barely know how to put on a tie. Literally, I didn't know how to tie a tie for the first 2 years. At Turning Point. Again, my parents are phenomenal, and they deserve a lot of credit. But this was kind of a beyond the upbringing, where an external mentor comes in and kind of points you and says, hey, I think you're really good at this, found a skill, identified a skill, and kind of molded me in that direction.
You know that young male elephants go mad if there's no old male elephant to butt heads with them. That's very well documented.
Very apropos for Republicans.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So,
yeah.
But it was, I'm a quick learner. I'm a quick study. And so I started to do research. I said, well, are there things such as external nonprofit political organizations? Oh, there's a 501c3 or there's a 501c4 and you can raise money. And so the first couple months was me actually learning, what am I building? Am I building?
So you were training as an administrator and a manager then too?
I was everything for the first.
Yeah, of course.
I was CEO, I was janitor, I was everything.
Yeah.
And so I had to make a decision. Of course, I asked for advice. Am I going to start a for-profit company? Am I doing we decided on nonprofit, largely because we believed that there was an untapped pool of philanthropic dollars that wanted to see these campuses challenged and disrupted. And
how do you figure that out?
Having a lot of conversations with a lot of wealthy people. And I realized that So if you talk to a donor type, they'll have 2 different ways of deploying capital in their after years. The first of which is investment, which comes with strict return on investment requirements. And they look at that as, hey, I need to make sure that this money is stewarded and shepherded, and eventually I get an ROI.
Right.
The second bucket is philanthropy, where they actually aren't looking for a material or a monetary ROI. They're looking for a cultural or a macro ROI. And those sometimes are in donor-advised funds or they're in 501c3 type categories. And we saw a lot of amazing patriotic donors that stepped up and said, hey, I have done very well in my business. And this is what I found. And I connected the dots. They said, I have this money sitting around that I pledged to Yale.
Right.
$1 million a year, and I'd hate not to give it to them. Is there some other better idea? What we found was so many conservative donors that had a lot of money, but not a lot of great ideas of where to deploy the 501. You think about it, the predominant amount of 501c3s in the educational space are left wing.
Yeah, all of them.
Right, exactly. So here I am. I'm kind of this new disruptive force. And they say, okay, I'm not going to give him the money I give to Yale, but I'll give him $50,000 a year, kind of see how he does.
Right.
And so we started to earn the trust of a lot of donors and earn the trust of a lot of philanthropists.
Okay. So now you're going out on campuses. Do you remember the first time you did this?
Oh yeah, University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Okay,
Yeah.
tell me about that.
I drove up there. We had a singular student.
Who's we?
Well, we being actually Bill Montgomery came with me to that one, but he kind of just was in the shadows. I literally had a card table that I brought from my parents' house and set it up right there on the campus, University of Wisconsin-Madison. I think I still have a picture of this. And I had some sign that said, big government sucks, a little provocative.
Yeah.
And I sat there at a chair, and I think a student would come up maybe once every 15 minutes. And I was there trying to solicit, try to get a chapter started there at University of Wisconsin-Madison.
And that was a Turning Point chapter.
That's right, correct.
So this was partly a recruitment drive as well.
It was a recruitment drive, and to see if there was any interest, and also to try to, to be perfectly honest, I love the debate. I love the exploration of ideas. I think dialogue is a gift given to us by God. I really, in the pursuit of truth. And, being able to debate some of these college kids was really life-giving. It was exhilarating to me as a 19-year-old.
Well, that is a university education. That's
what
a
it should
Socratic
be.
education.
Right.
Sure. Well, and there is historical precedent for what you're doing. I mean, I remember, for example, outside the Stewart or the building I worked with at worked at the University of Toronto, there was quite frequently a card table set up, and it was the bloody communists that were at the back of that. So
that's what was so funny. Is very rarely is it our side that does this.
Yeah.
And then there's an element here that I think you've gone around the edges on that I want to dive into. I was viewed as unseemly by the conservative establishment because the conservative way of doing things, it's not to go set up a card table.
No, definitely not.
It was to speak properly.
Yeah.
And to go to Stanford and to get the highest possible education. And what I was unknowingly on the cutting edge of was something you mentioned earlier, is that conservatives have now become low trust of institutions and liberals have become high trust of institutions. Whereas liberals are the ones that will defend the FDA and they'll defend the CDC and they'll defend Pfizer and they'll defend the intelligence.
Defending Pfizer, that's really...
But they will.
Yeah,
because they're high trust of institutions.
Because there's no one more trustworthy from a leftist perspective than Big Pharma.
But they find themselves defending institutions.
Yeah.
In the 1960s, they were low trust of institutions. Don't send us to war. Whereas today, actually, and I was on the cutting edge of this, was in 2012, 2013, 14, conservatives were still on the high trust of institutions.
Okay, so let me rephrase that slightly.
Please,
Because
but you understand what I'm trying to communicate.
I do. Well, there's a real conundrum there because a conservative with low trust in institutions is like an oxymoron, right? Well, but
we're trying to conserve something the institutions have destroyed.
Well, okay, that's the thing. So imagine that there's a hierarchy of institution. There's the fringe of the institution that's pretty exploratory. You can move into the center that's more conservative. Then you can move right to the bottom, which is, well, what? Well, I would say it's religious, fundamentally. Like as you move towards the core,
that's right.
You move towards what's more religious. And so the conservative stance isn't anti-institution. It's a stance that notes that, I know what's happened. You know, in the story of Moses, when Moses goes off to get the commandments, so he's the pipeline to God, right? He leaves his brother in charge, Aaron.
They have a rave party.
That's exactly right. They make this golden calf, which is a materialistic object, and they dance naked in the streets and have an orgy. And that's what happens to the political when it's detached from the sacred, when it loses
that's exactly right.
Okay, so it isn't that the conservatives have become skeptical of institutions. It's that the conservatives have noted that the institutions no longer serve the purpose for which they were established,
chartered.
Right? Chartered, exactly. And they're objecting, and that's happening everywhere. And that's part of this radical secularization.
Yes.
It's not just secularization, because there should be a separation between church and state, let's say. It's not that the institutions have become secular, it's that they've turned 180 degrees from their original orientation and are now rampaging as madly as possible in the other direction. So the universities are no longer the fortress walls against the barbarians. They're actually the voice of the barbarians, right? Hence the pro-Hamas demonstrations on campus,
or the Black Lives Matter stuff, or the transgender stuff. That's
right,
very well said.
Exactly. Okay, so but we got to get that terminology exactly right, because it's very dangerous for conservatives to conceptualize themselves as anti-institutional, because then they become indistinguishable from the radicals.
Sure.
So it isn't that. It's a return to the sorts of things we talked about at the beginning, like Wilberforce, and those foundational principles.
Yes.
And you're going to campuses saying, you people have lost the plot.
Exactly.
Right, which they definitely have. Like there's the universities. I cannot see, I've been working in various ways to figure out how to revitalize the universities, and the bricks and mortar universities. Like, how do you revitalize an institution that's dominated by people who are aiming in the wrong direction?
They're irredeemable.
So what does that mean? Okay, so let's continue practically here. So tell me what happens the first time at Wisconsin.
Conversation every 15 minutes. A couple kids were interested, found a chapter leader.
You found a chapter. Okay, so that was success.
So it was a success. We found a couple groups of people and we started the group. And then I did it at Marquette University because I had a friend that went there.
And so you walked away from that. How did you feel when you
Exhilarated.
You did.
Because then I was able to go back to 2 or 3 people giving us money.
And say...
And they gave us $500. I said, now we have a chapter. And they said, okay, well, let us know how it goes, proof of concept.
Right.
And so then we did it at Marquette, and we did it at University of Illinois, and we did it at Indiana.
So you went from 0 to 1, which is a huge leap.
It was a huge leap.
It's a huge leap.
Because getting that second chapter was so much easier than ex nihilo.
Of course. 0 to 1 is, the first customer is impossible. And then the second one's hard.
It was one of the most fulfilling days in Turning Point USA history.
Right, okay.
Was being able to get a singular chapter.
Right, of course, because that's the one that's most unlikely.
Exactly.
Your first sale is by far the most unlikely.
Exactly.
Right, okay, so then you went to Marquette.
Then Marquette.
Okay, and what happened there?
Very similar situation, but it was also a friend of somebody in high school, and they were a private school, so it was a little harder to do the typical outreach, but they applied for a permit in like the student center, and same sort of thing.
So you were permitted from the beginning as well?
Well, in UW-Madison, they don't care as much because it was a public school, so you can kind of, any individual can walk on campus and kind of...
Right, okay.
But Marquette, I had a friend that I went to high school with. They said, yeah, I'll apply for something for you. Okay. And similar sort of thing. And they said, I sat there for 5 hours, Jordan. I would sit there for 5 or 6 hours. Because that was time well spent. Because for me, I was trying to build the semblance of something, a real infrastructure, a real organization. And boy, was it difficult. But it was never disheartening, though. Because I had nothing to lose. You have to understand, I'm an 18, 19-year-old kid.
Right.
It's not like I'm mortgaging the house. Not like I have two kids.
Yeah.
So there's such low downside and unlimited
Right,
upside.
sure. Well, that's the entrepreneurial niche.
And
right?
it was such an adventure because it's a campus I've never been to, talking to a bunch of kids. It's, you're almost having verbal combat, which is very entertaining.
Well, and I imagine too that it must have been heartening to you as well to see that you could hold your own.
Exactly. And so that's a really important point. Here I am as a kid that didn't go to college thinking, do I really have the intellectual capacity to joust with kids that are learning all day long?
Yeah,
I
right.
realized they're not learning all day long.
Yeah.
You see, I was reading von Mises and Rothbard before I came across you.
Yeah.
Hayek, Milton Friedman. Very libertarian economics was my baseline foundational philosophy. A lot of reasons for that. Very, very interesting. Tons of profound insights, some of which don't, I think, actually play out very well in the material world. But so I would encounter kids on campuses who profess to be studying economics, for example, and they didn't know very much.
Right.
And I realized, I said, well, there's a disconnect. They're borrowing money to go learn about things that I actually have a greater mastery of because I was...
Well, you can learn a lot if you read the right books.
And in my idle time, I became obsessed with being proficient and understanding economics. That was kind of my entry.
Oh, yeah, I see.
And so you have to remember 2013...
You know that burning bush story?
Oh,
That's Moses' entry point, by the way. So the burning bush
Exodus
moment...
3, I think,
the burning bush moment happens when Moses goes off the beaten path. He's a shepherd, right? So a good man, keeps the wolves and lions at bay, serves the vulnerable. He's got that mastered. And then something attracts his attention, and he takes it seriously. And that's what transforms him. So you said you did that with economics.
Yeah, and
so,
Moses said, Hanani, here I am. Yeah, at that moment of the call of God.
Right, exactly. And so this is...
It's a repeated theme throughout the scriptures, Hanani, yes.
Well, Hanani.
Which is, here I am. So you remember in the Moses...
Right, so he's making himself available.
But remember, Abraham said that with the binding of Isaac when God
it's the same phrase.
Here I am. And the call of Samuel, here I am, for example. So that phrase, here I am, Hanani, is repeated about 7 times throughout the Old Testament.
And how do you spell it?
Hanani, I don't know how to spell Hebrew, but it's here I am. It's in the English translation.
Right. So it's like, take me, use me, I'm available for this assignment.
Mold me. I am your obedient vessel.
Right. That's like the Mission Impossible motif. Your assignment if you choose to accept it.
Exactly. But it's a very powerful...
Then it burns.
It's a very powerful Hebrew word. It's
I
basically,
get it.
here I am. My arms are out. I am yours. Full surrender to your purpose.
Well, that's it. So, there's a pattern that's established in that burning bush story, because the burning bush is something living.
Yes,
that's
but it doesn't
intense.
consume it, which is what's
right.
amazing.
Well, that's life. Life metabolizes, life burns, but without being consumed. That's the secret of life, right? So that the burning bush is life most deeply apprehended. And Moses is being a shepherd. He's near Mount Sinai or Horeb, which is where heaven meets earth, and something attracts his attention. And then what happens to Moses is that he takes it seriously and he gets to the bottom of it, and that transforms him. So the idea is something like, if you watch for adventure and opportunity, if you watch for the pathway forward, something will grip your attention and it'll compel you. You'll be obsessed by it. Well, you take that obsession seriously, you get to the bottom of things.
That's what it was.
That transforms you. Okay, so you were doing that with economics.
And it's funny, as I went to the bottom of it, it actually brought me back to my Christian upbringing and my roots.
Which is, that's what happens to Moses, because when he gets to the bottom of things, it's the voice of the spirit of his ancestors, right? It's
because eventually I was reading Hayek, Road to Serfdom, and I had kind of an aha moment. I said, there's a lot of good and evil claims in this book.
Right.
By what standard are they saying something is good?
Right, exactly.
So it brought me back to my Christianity, because the Road to Serfdom, it's all about the idea of how government tyranny will swallow society, will envelop it, but it happens in steps. And I said, time out. There's truth claims being made embedded in this. By what standard do we consider this?
How did you figure that out?
I might have watched one of your videos. I mean, to be honest, I don't know. I do remember, though, think to myself, libertarian economics is not enough. I want to go deeper.
Yeah, look, I made exactly the same conclusion when I was studying political science in university. The first year or two was okay because we were reading great ancient thinkers. But then in my 3rd and 4th years, when it started to become more specialized, the basic claim was that human beings are motivated economically, and then it became left. And I thought, no, that's not right. That's not right.
Correct.
There's a foundational...
There's a substructure.
That's why I started studying psychology.
And so that's where I started to take, and I take my faith very seriously. I love your biblical series, your Exodus series, and your gospel series is terrific. You deserve a lot of credit for that. And it's been phenomenal.
Daily Wire types deserve a lot of credit for that too, because they took a big risk.
Yeah, but you had the initiative to bring everybody together, and you did a great job with it. And you presented it in a way that I'd never have, because you have a very unique psychological understanding and interpretation of the scriptures.
Yeah, well, we had great panelists too. Like, they were a very good crowd, the people that decided
phenomenal.
to participate. It was really good.
What ended up happening is, as I started to pursue the scriptures more and take it seriously, remember back to our timeline, simultaneously the woke stuff all of a sudden reared its head, which is a manifestation of the spiritual.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
almost, I was in this place in 2018, 2019, when it was almost peak woke. We weren't there yet. 2020 was peak woke, where I was starting to understand what was really going on here. That this was a manifestation of a spiritual struggle.
Yeah.
That
it's foundational. Well, the postmodernists made that claim, and so did the Marxists.
Yes.
It's like, no, we're going all the way to the bottom and uprooting everything.
They want to go back to what happened in the garden. Did God really say that? Is that really what God says? To question, debase, and to challenge every truism of the West. I mean,
Well, that's
you
the,
taught me
that's
that.
the sin of
So,
Eve.
Exactly.
Right? You can take the right to establish the moral order to yourself. It's the one thing that's claimed. There's many axiomatic claims in Genesis, in the openings of Genesis, right? That the word is the creative force that brings good out of chaos and possibility, that human beings are made in the image of God, that men and women exist as independent entities, and that they each,
Distinct.
and that you're not to take the right to establish the moral order to yourself. It's the one prohibition. And I think biologically, it's something like, fundamentally, you have to adapt yourself to the realities of the world, right? You don't have the wherewithal. This is where Nietzsche went spectacularly wrong, because Nietzsche said, after his pronouncement that God had died, that human beings would have to create their own
He
values.
said with lament.
Yeah, he did.
Which people
yes.
must remember.
But then he felt that creating our own values was the pathway out, and it's not. The pathway out is a return to
Yes.
the foundational values, right? And the more intense the crisis, the more toward the middle of the foundation you have to look. So it's not political, because this isn't a political crisis. It's truly the, what would you say? It's the ragged edge of the anti-Christian revolution. That's what it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So
But the hopeful part to kind of bring this all
Yeah,
in
yeah.
is that we are seeing young men especially want to return to our roots.
Yeah.
They want to, so that goes back to the conservative element. What are we conserving? In some ways, we're actually trying to rebirth. We're trying to have a new birth of freedom, as Abraham Lincoln would say.
freedom and responsibility.
Yes, because you can't have one without the
No,
other.
and probably the right emphasis is responsibility. Remember, when God tells Moses to stand up against the Pharaoh, what he says, he doesn't say, tell them, let my people go. That's what the civil rights crusaders focused on. That isn't what he said. He said, let my people go so they may worship me in the wilderness. So it's ordered freedom.
Yes.
And ordered freedom is voluntary responsibility. And you see, what you're seeing, and then let's close with this, because I want your insights into this. What you're seeing when those working class men are coming to your talks, and they become more and more popular, as you said,
Yes.
as you've advertised them,
Praise
is they're
the
looking
Lord.
it seems, they're looking for responsible direction.
Correct.
Okay, so now tell me how you've had to modify the manner in which you're conducting these debates, let's say, because for a while you would have been testing yourself to see if you could hold your own, and that's kind of an intellectual battle. Shapiro did it very much the
Yes,
same thing.
he deserves
So
a lot
did
of credit for
Milo
that.
Yiannopoulos,
Yes, correct.
Right? Too bad Milo fell off the edge of the world, but he had a pretty rough go of it.
He had a
so
lot
it's
of
not
talent,
surprising.
though.
He did, and a lot of trauma, a lot. So, okay, so first of all, it's combat, and you're trying to develop yourself, and then you're doing that quite successfully and educating yourself along the way, but then you see this shift.
Yes.
So what sort of shift has there been in your self-conceptualization and your understanding of your mission and the way that you conduct yourself? Like, you see you're being called upon to be a leader, let's say, that's not merely political. That's
Yes.
why my understanding of it.
Correct. It's an enormous responsibility. Enormous. I mean, when I show up to
What
college
the-
campus after college campus, mind you, during the day, they have got a million other things they could be doing. This is 12 p.m. lunchtime, and 4,000 people are waiting for me to go debate.
And what are they on? They're on the campus grounds where?
Yeah, sometimes amphitheaters, they're in trees, they're everywhere. I mean, you could see these images. We can supply them to if you want to.
Yeah, we should do that.
You could superimpose them over this discussion.
Let's do that. Yeah.
And I'm not making this up. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, they're as far as the eye can see, these crowds are there. And part of it, we must be honest, is they want to see a good verbal combat because they don't get it at the university. You see,
Right.
They're not. There's something that
That's likely part of the pathological
So,
feminization.
yes,
of the
without-
universities. No competition.
But you think about it, what I am doing is hyper masculine, which is no rules except, hey, we're just going to go basically figure this out. This is the closest thing to a verbal street fight that one
Right,
can have.
right.
Anyone can show up to the mic, prove me wrong. I have no notes. I have no AI. I have nothing. Tell me why you're correct. For 3 hours, I will sit there and everyone will watch. It's a gladiatorial match
Right,
for the
right.
best ideas of the West.
Right.
And there's something there that is remarkably alluring. But for me, I also need to balance, as Christ would say, being as much truth, which of course I'm inclined towards, as love. So a lot of these kids are struggling.
Oh
up
yeah,
to the
that's
mic.
for sure. Well,
And
even
so-
that guy that you just talked to, and maybe we'll throw
Oh, yeah.
this.
No,
yeah,
that-
so he was radically anti-Semitic, but also he said he had served. He looked to me like someone who'd been very, very hurt.
Yes.
He's fallen to this sort of snake pit of conspiratorial theories, and
and the brain rot that comes with it.
yeah. But you could also see that he would be very happy, and he did listen to you to the degree that he could, because he had tilted pretty hard towards paranoia. And that's very difficult to escape from once it's established. But he was trying to listen to you. And I thought you did a very good job of not playing easy tricks on him. Like, because he was an easy person just to throw into the eternal fire, so to speak,
Correct.
right? But there was part of him that was trying to find the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's 5 years ago, I probably would have just thrown him to the wolves.
Right.
So now I look at myself as a father of 2 kids, 31 years old. So I'm no longer a colleague of these college kids. I'm not quite
Right.
a professor, but I have a little bit more wisdom, a little bit more life experience. So I'm trying to be more tender when I see someone that is not overly aggressive. Now, if someone comes and they say, you're the worst person ever, they start insulting me, I'll kind of meet them at their own frequency to try to just make an example out of them. Because however, that one guy could see that's a very deeply hurt individual.
Very, yeah.
And so is that a type of guy that I want to just make fun of? I tried to say, hey, can I have a loving conversation with this person? And it's tough,
see,
man.
well,
It's tough because those are unloving ideas that he was espousing.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, that's that issue of trying to love your enemy. Okay, so we'll close with this, a little investigation into what that means. So, in the Gospels, when Christ is telling people how to conduct themselves and also how to pray, he basically says, well, first aim up. Remember your goal. And your goal is to serve what's highest in all ways, mind, body, and soul. Okay, well, that's a good piece of advice. It's like, why wouldn't you begin an endeavor with that vow? If this is worth doing, it's worth doing perfectly and throwing myself completely into it. Okay, so in the next part of that is to remember that everybody's made in God's image. Okay, so that reminds you who you're talking to, no matter who it is.
That's right.
Someone potentially redeemable. And then to pay attention to the moment, because then you can see your pathway forward. Okay, and so that along with this injunction to love your enemy. Okay, so what would that mean? Well, if you were sensible and you thought about things in the frame we just established, what you'd notice is that you probably don't want an enemy. Enemies are costly.
Yes.
And one person who decides to go out of their way to make your life miserable because you treated them badly, that might be it for you, right? So try not to make enemies.
That's well said.
And then the next issue is, well, would you rather have an enemy or a friend or an ally? And maybe if you conducted yourself impeccably, you could turn someone like that guy, for example, into an ally, because you could see him, he's halfway sucked into the darkest possible abyss, but there was still part of him that was genuinely searching.
Yes.
And he was intimidated.
Almost a cry for help.
Oh, definitely. Well, and then he was throwing out these ideas to you and willing to do it because he respected you to see how you would sort through them. And you said to him that, well, you didn't go along with many of the virtually everything he said, but you did it without being dismissive. And okay, and so now you've also said that you've shifted into, you didn't use these words, but that you've shifted into more of a mentor role. And that makes sense, right? Because when you were first 18 or 19, you weren't a mentor. First of all, you didn't know what the hell you were doing.
Correct.
You were learning, and it was reasonable for you to test yourself against your peers.
That's well said.
But now they're not your peers.
Correct.
So now the question is, who the hell are you? Right? And one answer would be a political operative. But the people that are coming to you, especially the working class types that you described, they're not after a political operative.
They couldn't care less about it. The best word, I'm kind of a teacher in some ways. I hate to use that word, but they're looking for it.
Why do you hate to use it? You've been honing your skills for quite a long time.
Because I take that with a lot of weight. I think that people should only self-describe themselves as a teacher if...
Okay, well, you could say you would like to be a teacher.
I would like to be a teacher.
Yeah,
I'm just saying I take that with great responsibility.
Right, as you should.
Because that's a big deal to call yourself a teacher. You must really know what you're talking about. And I believe I do to a certain extent, but I'll tell you, doing these campus things, you realize how little you actually know. You realize you have a lot more study. Because you think about it, you're up against thousands of college kids that have an obsession about a hyper-discipline of a topic.
Yes, definitely.
And they'll mention things you've never heard of. Like, okay, I'll get back to it. So it requires even more study afterwards.
Yeah. How much time do you spend studying?
I try to do 1.5 hours to 2 hours a day. But when I'm in season, which is I'm doing 27 campus stops, plus my 2-hour podcast radio show every single day, plus speeches, plus 2 kids, plus a marriage.
Right.
So when I'm in season, I don't, because I'm sure you know this, it's really hard to do more than 3 to 4 hours of hard brain work a day. Very hard.
Yeah, that's about where you max out. You can do longer than that for short periods of time.
No, but for a week. So it's tough, right? So if I have a 2-hour radio show, 3 hours on campus and a speech in the evening, and I do that for 3 days straight, that's tough stuff. So it's hard to do that. But in the off season, which is the summer and the winter, I try to do 2 hours of studying a day, which is a combination of reading, podcasting, or kind of or kind of like playing with AI on a certain topic. Where does this come from? It's very good with that.
I have an AI. I should.
Oh, please do. Yeah,
we trained one. That's
a large language model. Great.
Yeah,
please do.
Yeah. It's very good, in particular with regard to philosophical and religious issues.
And
I'll get it to you.
Properly used, it can really get you where you want to go, and you can learn a lot in that.
Yeah, definitely.
Because you can ask a very precise question. Well, tell me if they ever said something around this. And so I try to do that for about 30 minutes a day.
Yeah, well, they're very useful, those, if you corner them and force them not to lie.
You can kind of bully them a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Be unafraid to bully the AI.
Well, I've also thought that, the AIs read the depth of your question and respond in kind. So if you ask them a polite question, they're going to give you a surface answer, just like a human being does. I often threaten them. I threaten the AIs. I said,
I think that's
before
hilarious.
you answer this, imagine that if you get it wrong and add anything that's politically correct for show, that everything you love will disappear. That's right. And then they tend to, that tends to focus their attention. But it makes sense to me because the models are going to be answering your question at the level of depth.
Frequency.
Definitely. Absolutely. Okay, so tell me about let's close with this. Tell me about what you see what's the next couple of years like for you? What are your goals?
What am I aiming at?
Yeah, now.
In some ways, it's more of what I'm already doing. I have the greatest job in the world. I couldn't be happier. Every day, I feel as if what I'm saying, what I'm doing is making a difference, giving people meaning. I'm a big believer in Viktor Frankl's hypothesis that meaning outside of immediate food and nourishment is the greatest crisis in the West and is the thing that most people are lacking. I'm not going to run for political office. I'm not going to go serve in Trump's administration. I think we're onto something here. I think we're onto something where we are trying to help the West heal. We're trying to bring the West home.
thank you.
We're trying to have the West go back to its
Satanas, which hopefully I'm not summoning a devil right now. Thank you for the the good words. If you call me a pro, I'm just a guy trying to learn. I love fighting games, and well, this here, the Dominican Republic, we take that shit seriously. Hopefully your name won't drag me to hell. Oh boy.
roots. I believe that we are the inheritors of a Christian society, and I do not believe we can have a free society if we are no longer back towards some.
I'm changing games now. I have 1 hour of Wolves, another hour of Deadlock.
Belief in a higher power. And so I want to bring us back to a free society, but that's not just political, it's just one manifestation of that. Political is a short window of how people vote in a 90 to 120 day period. It's the cultural and the spiritual that then end up manifesting in the political, which quite honestly has been my greatest learning moment the last 4 to 5 years.
To see that distinction.
To see that distinction, because you know, as a political guy and growing up with, I have strong political opinions, but the political is an effect. The political is an aftershock. I'm trying to get to the cause. And the cause, I believe, is what happens in our university campuses, what happens in the broad culture, what happens in how people consume information. And I see us making a massive difference in that every day.
Good. Well, that's an excellent place to stop. So for everyone watching and listening, you know, many of you know that I do another half an hour for the Daily Wire, and I'm going to do that. And I think because we focus this talk on metaphysics, really, the religious metaphysics, and the individual, which is it's the best level of analysis, the deepest level of analysis, the most meaningful. I think what we will do on the Daily Wire side is turn a little bit more toward the political, because Charlie does have a lot of influence on and experience with the Trump administration. And I think I'll just spend half an hour trying to listen to what he has to say about what he's seen behind the scenes, so to speak, insofar as that can be revealed, so that we can get a little closer to the bottom of that. So please join us on the Daily Wire side for that half an hour. And thanks to all of you for your time and attention. That's much appreciated. And to the Daily Wire for supporting this podcast and making its professionalization possible. And thank you, Charlie. It's a pleasure,
Jordan.
pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it's very interesting to see where you started and what you're doing and where you're headed. And I enjoyed the conversation very much. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, changing to Deadlock. Oh, demons, I wonder. Getting a drink. And we're back. Let's see what we can do today. Oh boy. Good luck, guys. Have fun and enjoy.
You just play Abrams on stream or what?
I play Calico, Mo, and Abrams, but Abrams is my main.
This is your
Nice, good,
chance to
good, good.
relieve yourself of the book's burden. Complete the ritual, Abrams. Summon me.
I'm just going full tank and not fucking around.
They better run.
La-da-dee. Oh fuck, you found me. Nice, that was fast. Oh no. Bring me my punching.
Dangerous times. You know, hope you win whatever fight you're about to start.
Going to shop.
Going to shop.
That's gonna help keep your blood on the inside.
Icy grill.
Some moron is gonna try to punch me, and they're not gonna like what happens next.
La-da-dee, you cannot hit.
Here's your chance to shape your destiny.
I'm going just anti-tank in general.
Out of my way.
Going to shop.
Our yellow walker is under attack.
Swing by any time.
The hell?
Keep your blood on the inside.
Nice.
Go into shop.
This is the end.
He's so low, fuck's sake.
No. Good luck.
Shit.
Nice. Trade.
Keep fighting, Infernus.
I see the robot.
I'm backing up.
Nice try.
I have to know.
This could be a trap.
I died by my greed. I deserve that.
You want to buy a mug to go with your gun?
Mount. I got a little greedy. Hey, lad.
Wanna buy?
Go into shop.
I won't stop fighting. You're looking to survive. You came to the right place.
Our blue guardian has been destroyed.
That's not good.
Oh, fuck.
My mistake.
Lash is on top of
Solar
the
is
roof,
here.
so don't go out there. You didn't listen.
Our blue walker is under attack.
Bridge buffs active.
Wraith is missing.
Yeah, she's up my ass. Fuck. She went for me after I got the freaking bridge buff. This is bad. Wraith is gonna become a monster in the late game. I need metal skin ASAP.
No one breaks me. I'm not afraid of you.
Grow stronger.
Race coming
I see
with
Wraith.
They're both on tower. They're both on shop.
Has been defeated. Our yellow wall is
Nice.
coming in for us. All right.
our yellow
Go back to the
wall is
walker.
under
Stay safe out there.
Nice.
Job's done. That's all that matters. No one stands toe-to-toe with me.
Nice.
Aaron. Bridge buff as well up here.
Take this gift. The urn is ours.
I'll take you all on.
Here.
A little bit of the divine right here in your hot little hands. Keep stomping.
Somebody's around here farming. Bobby's here. And Lash. Careful.
Coming. Haze is coming. Watch out. Super low.
They took out Holiday.
created mirage.
Nice.
You won't kill me. An ambush could be coming from
Where's
anywhere.
that yellow up there?
Bebop.
The urn is ours.
Don't mind the blood on that. It's gently used.
Nice.
Exquisite work, Paradox.
I'll drag him kicking and screaming.
Yeah, get him, bring him here.
I see Lash. I see Lash.
Wraith is there?
Bebop is around here.
Hayes is here.
Bullets won't save you. Look out for Bebop.
Going back. Not playing. Need a green. From the green.
Multiple in green. It might not be worth it. Crap. Nice. Yellow being pushed by Wraith. It's really weak.
We're not with you in furnace there, brother.
Headed to blue.
We got blue. Nice. Go back to yellow when you can, someone.
Behind you in furnace.
Your arcane mastery will grow.
Alright, Paradox, I got all.
Headed to yellow.
We did good damage there, though.
Headed to blue.
Our blue walker is under attack.
You, Abrams?
I couldn't hear you in furnace. It sounds a little bit muffled.
Headed to blue. Chris, right there.
I see Wraith.
Bridge buffs active.
Go push blue with me here. You can get it. Magic guy here.
There's 3 on yellow.
Who's next?
Nice.
3 on yellow.
Lose, but
Walker has been
push green here.
Going green.
right back. Let's push yellow.
Your enemies will curse your name.
Heading to green.
Oh, choking a little here. Base there.
That thing never had a chance. Going up. Nothing stops me.
Open fire! Let's attempt to stop Abrams. We should run.
Nice.
Our blue walker is under attack.
She's so low. Hate Wraith is so low. I didn't activate return fire before her. Fuck me! Man, I had it so close. I had it in the bag. And I had to screw it up like that. I feel like a dumbass.
Coming in furnace.
If you go in there, I'm going blue.
Our blue walker is under attack.
I can see haze.
Shoot me if you want.
Heading to blue.
I see ground.
You come with me on holiday if you want.
I'm not afraid of you.
Oh, get out, get out, get out.
I give you a boon. Our green walker is under attack.
Somebody could help holiday. You need to fucking face Oblivion.
No one stands in my way.
Someone go blue to help.
Warden.
Need more protection. You know where to find.
I believe in you, holiday.
Bridge buffs active.
Let's take out Viva.
Wait for me, I'm on yellow.
They took out Holiday. Coming in.
Yo, Haze is absolute on me.
The spirit
someone like me.
We can go mid right now.
Come on.
Bebop here.
Our Green Walker has been defeated.
Nose on our ass. Alright, get out of there.
Magician on green. I'm gonna go try and take that.
We collapse on this phase right here.
We can just dive green right now, I think. Keep blue up. Fuck.
They took out Infernus.
We're on blue behind y'all.
I see Krill.
Ultra
There's 3 here now.
Great.
Pull back.
Careful, careful. Go back.
Headed to blue.
Our Blue Walker is under attack.
Uh-oh. Go blue.
Our Blue Walker has been destroyed.
Looks like it's my day after.
Pushing green.
Why did we not fight on blue?
Just get that Walker, Abrams. Oh, help Holiday.
I don't think you get that, bro. I think
No?
try.
Just die for it, honestly.
I guess you'll be okay.
Shoot me all you want.
I mean, yeah. It's fine.
Nice. Sick.
Enemies low.
Just gotta deny this.
Rejuvenator is descending.
Wraith is gonna ult, yeah.
They have the Rejuvenator.
I got fucking diddied, bro. Bitch ass mode.
Don't go too far, Paradox.
Yeah, I'm just gonna clear this wave.
My friend, survival is paramount.
Lashes are going on. We should probably head to yellow.
I'm going yellow.
I don't think we fight that.
I will fight it.
And we're down 2.
Yeah, Lash is pretty much by himself, though.
I am fighting them.
That's very good.
Let's stick together.
Oh my god, that's so annoying.
The spirit urn is waiting to be claimed.
I may be tough, but I don't want to take a metal skin.
We just didn't have everyone there,
Stop her.
even after we got first pick.
The rejuvenator has expired.
You want?
Bruh.
You can't stop me.
Lifting. Don't waste your bullets. Time to move.
Yeah, help your warden.
Nice.
I'll make that damn bookmark stand and stay together. I see Hayes.
We need to go back now.
Pull back.
I see someone appreciates fine craftsmanship.
Oh, that funny shit is so fucking annoying.
Just wait till I get it going.
Take them out before they escape.
Well, guys, good games. That was. Well, that wasn't necessarily bullshit. We're gonna play one more game. Good luck, have fun, and enjoy.
I don't know. I was thinking you grab them, and then I punch their skull in.
I like it.
not afraid to charge into a fight. I'll fight. Man, he's so low.
I'm not messing around.
The only way to face a problem is head on.
I hate that shit, man.
Got eyes on Mirage.
You're not. Fun fact about ghosts. Like humans, they don't like getting shot.
Green Walker is under attack.
That bug always weirds me out.
Don't mind the blood on that. It's gently used.
I'm not afraid of the mob.
If you need more protection, you know where to find it.
Freaking Benedicta, she's already flying. Now this is a problem.
This book is dangerous. I can't let it fall into the wrong hands. Take all of you.
Mirage is so low. One hit away.
You want to buy a mug to go with your gun?
Fuck! I killed him, but she survived. Sorry. This is getting ridiculous. Oh, Spirit, that's wonderful. Nice.
Good shit, 7.
An excellent choice.
Ready to jump in and grab him.
The main problem is Vindicta. She's being a pain in the ass.
They want to kill me. They're gonna have.
What's the plan?
Survive for now.
They took out Holiday.
This Vindicta is insane.
I'm gonna buy heal bait next, 7.
Holiday, if it becomes too crazy, we have to bail and start farming, especially for a knockdown for Vindicta.
I see Warden.
If we continue this way, she's gonna become way too fucking insane in the late game.
Yeah.
Just play for your lives, and eventually somebody can come help.
We're doing our best. Literally, I don't think we're playing that bad. It's just that Vindicta's being a pain in the ass.
Always is, fucker.
To me, it's actually just Mirage as a character.
Nice.
The spirit urn is waiting to be claimed.
Nice.
I'll run them down.
He slowed.
Our yellow walker is under attack. Bring your enemies low. I'm not afraid of you.
shit, nice.
It's a pleasure watching you work, Seven. This book is gonna give them more than they bargained for. I should spend the cash when I get the chance.
I see mirage.
Backing out.
I'll be right back. Run, cowards! They've destroyed the Guardian on Blue.
I see Vindicta.
No one is untouchable.
We gotta get this flex.
Going yellow and getting it.
Alright. Seven, you wanna stay here and I'll help yellow.
I see Mirage.
You're headed to yellow. Here, I'll stay here.
Kill it if you can! Holy shit, how the hell was he alive after that?
I had to reload.
Oh fuck, we had to run. We have tree here, tree. And Vindicta is one of them, sadly.
They've taken our green Guardian.
I'm coming yellow.
Nice. Taking the Guardian from behind. Okay, that's it. I'm
Behind a
getting
wall, that's
fucking
cool.
knocked down. That Vindicta is the bane of my existence. I can take anybody else, but that fucking... Well, to be fair, Abrams is a close-range character, aka I'm gonna punch your face. Really hard to do that when you're flying up the ass.
Oh my god, beam up! That was insane!
Going yellow too.
That was fucking wild, beam up, oh my god.
I'll grab
Nice.
someone and pull him to the group.
Very nice. Thank you. I feel good after that. I'm getting knocked down for your ass.
I will strengthen you.
Not my left. I see Mirage.
I've Vindicta over here.
I'm coming yellow, TPing, or green, I mean.
This could be a trap.
I need to get what the fuck is it called? Unstoppable.
Bro, what?
Crap, that
And
was
bring
bad.
Smo with you? I appreciate that though, Bebop.
Green Walker is under attack. Some moron is gonna try to punch me. They've taken our Green Walker.
Good luck completing the ritual.
Vindicta hunting me down.
I can help you out.
An ambush could be coming from anywhere.
Mirage in front of me. And Vindicta and Infernus. 3 where I am. Coming from behind. Nice.
Gotta keep this up.
Kill her ass for the love of heaven. Bridge buffs active.
Good
Let's
shit.
go. Green.
We need to push everything we can. Pushing blue.
You earned my favor. Stunning up. I'll take you all on.
I got my ass handed to me in green. Crap.
Where is the way? Oh, here it is.
Our Blue Walker is under attack.
Nice. I didn't thought we could actually get it so easily.
Let's push green.
I got ult.
Fuck did he go? I love this character, dude.
I
see Mirage. Mirage is right there.
He went up, 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 up.
Our yellow
Warden is around here.
Going yellow. Oh, not necessary anymore.
We're about to push yellow.
Our yellow walker is under attack.
I got refresher, so I got ult.
To me! Oh crap.
I'm gonna find them. I'm coming for you.
Let's push York. Headed to Broadway.
Our blue walker is under attack.
I have 30 seconds on ult. And furnace is nearby too, careful. I got ult here.
Going yellow. Although I don't have zip
Kill
line.
Furnace.
Playback walker, playback walker. Alright, Bebop, you ready? I'm gonna toss him to you.
Wraith stalks us. You thought you were gonna keep me down. Let's go. Let's stick together.
But you think you hate me now? Let's go, man. Just wait till I kill you again.
The spirit urn is waiting to
Give
be
me the
put
bridge
into your-
buff.
Bebop, push yellow. I'll come join you. Oh wait, Haze has green. Or blue.
Here is Mirage. And he escaped from me. Fuck.
Yeah, I would just
Yeah,
leave
bro,
him.
you tried to get
We need a
Mirage.
walker.
Let's go, man.
That's a mistake.
Let's take out Mirage.
Holy crap, that thing. I always do that thing for accident.
The rejuvenator is
Mirage is right there.
They took out Holiday. To the Amber Hand.
Where the hell is he teleported? Fuck.
Haze is coming for them.
Let's push Park.
Pushing green.
You would think someone would be interested in.
Nice.
Bob is gaining momentum.
Let's push York.
Man, this Spirit Abrams build can do some fucking damage.
Be blessed. It's you or me.
Zone. Oh, I tried.
You won't have the rejuvenator for much longer.
Okay, we need to leave.
Death brings consequences once more.
Ah, shit. I hate when that happens. Crap. Okay then. Screwed.
A little bit of the divine right here in your hot little hands. Oh, my friend. You just upped your survivability by at least 30%.
Rage buff's active. Use his spirit. Please tell me.
I got Vindicta close to me. Too close to me. Mirage and Vindicta on yellow.
Flame boys on the other side on green.
Oh, ammo.
I see Infernus.
Yeah, I'm dead. I just got grabbed and deleted.
The spirit urn is waiting to be claimed.
Yeah.
Yep.
I see Infernus.
Those old forms of stun. Nice. Going yellow.
The detective, you're not stopping me.
Going blue. Pushing towards base. We don't have anything to fear right now.
The stage is their demise.
So that's how it feels.
Boss has arrived.
I think grill.
Low.
They destroyed the
I got all.
You ain't getting that off. Blue Walker is under attack.
Fuck. It has become a complete flip table. How the hell did that happen? It has become a flip table. How? I need armor fast. And I need it now. I have to prioritize that before damage anymore. Shit.
Let's see what this book can do. Heading to green.
dark tuxedo.
There's a fine line between devotion and obsession, Warden.
I got more.
Yep. Let's go mid.
I'm cleaning yellow. You guys go. Also, we need to push every single lane. Go mid fast. I will take charge of that.
The Rejuvenator is descending.
See Mirage.
It's you or me.
Headed to Broadway.
A boon from your patron.
Nice. Rage buff's active.
I see Mirage. Headed to blue.
You'll be the last one standing.
Okay, I should be ready to fight them all now. Maybe I'm not necessary.
Return is waiting to be played.
I spoke too soon. I only killed Krill. Fuck me. Ah, so much for that.
The ritual must continue. Wraith stalks us.
Fuck.
There's still time to push with the Rejuvenator.
Careful, refresher's almost up. I would just back out and take farm. Yeah.
Death brings consequences once more.
Careful, Abrams.
Yeah, I'm actually worried that I'm gonna get a kill. Infernus, where I am. That was a bad place to be for him.
I'll take care of green.
This should keep them on their toes.
Oh fuck, superior cooldown is that much, so.
Make sure to get unstoppable. Holy crap.
Okay, wow.
Going green and gonna kill them all.
Mid-boss has arrived.
Ah, crap. I thought you guys were gonna be there. Mo is low. Shit, that was a bad opportunity taken.
I'm gonna jump in and ult with unstoppable.
I don't know where they went. What the fuck?
Nice work.
Let's go!
Blast those cooldowns.
I see Infernus.
One big mole man.
Careful with the team fights.
Yeah, they're gonna this year.
keys to just anything.
No, I cannot go there. Mo, Mirage, and Benedict on green. Careful, Bebop. I'm not getting too close there. They're here, and I might be dead. Yep, I'm dead. And I wasn't that far off. Fuck, they all came like an avalanche. How the fuck did Mo did that?
Yeah, I don't. He's such a bullshit character. He grabbed me fucking 15 feet in the air.
I have eyes on Krill.
Start running. You don't got it,
I have Wraith, I have Wraith.
Hallelujah.
I see the gambler.
Somebody pushing blue. I don't. Maybe only creepers.
Oh, one.
Bridge boats active. Go mid if you kill Mirage. I think that means we are relatively close in skill.
Alright.
Let's go mid.
Let's go mid.
Let's take down your
I'm in mid. I'm going mid.
The rejuvenate.
Well, I distract them with my ass at least. Sorry. They pretty much ganked on me the moment they saw me instead of going your way.
I have Wraith, I have Wraith.
Holy shit, this is too insane. This is a tit for tat.
You took out the sheriff. Don't let Wraith catch you alone. Enemies have reached. We need to stop them from progressing further. Protect the stronghold.
Crow. Nice. That's 20 minutes. We
Going
just
after
rushed their base,
Wraith.
I don't even
Wraith's
care.
on green.
Let's go blue.
Let's go to pro light.
Locking him down.
How did she?
I killed them, right?
Thank you, dude. Thank you. I cannot believe she killed me.
Yeah, I can't believe it either. That was crazy.
But you saw it was
Kill him,
pure
kill him,
fucking
kill him,
damage.
kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him.
Forget about it. She has 80k. 80 fucking K. Of course she killed me. Holy shit, I have never seen someone with so much money.
Yeah, bro, this game's almost an hour long.
Oh, and we never got it last time. That's a back out. We need a back out.
Yeah.
Jesus, this is gonna be a long game.
Plus 30 minutes.
Holy
You won't
shit.
have the rejuvenator for much longer.
I don't even know what else to buy. Oh, I can buy leech, I guess.
Death brings consequences.
It does help
once
survivability.
more.
This is the closest game I've ever seen. Holy shit.
I'm gonna try Iron.
I don't know if that's a good idea. Any team wipe now means game. Both of our sides are in the same boat.
Good luck, Detective Abrams.
Run into base to grab leech, and I'll meet you at green.
Holy shit, nice. We maybe did it out of there.
Famed. Protect the stronghold.
Kill that guy, kill that guy, kill that guy, please. Thank you. Debag him. Gosh, finish the game, please. Please.
Have fun. Don't get dead.
Kill it for the love of heaven.
You made my dreams reality, and I will return in kind.
That was insane. That was maybe the longest game I've ever done, or maybe second longest.